As you guys know, your 20s are arguably the most important decade of your life. There's going to be many situations and decisions that you come across where if you handle them correctly, you're pretty much going to put your life on easy mode. However, if you handle those same decisions poorly, fall into the wrong habits, etc., you're going to set yourself up for a very long recovery through your 30s and your 40s. So in today's video, we're going to look at the tier list of how to destroy your 20s. So let's go ahead, let's get into it. All right, so to start off this list here, we have partying and not progressing. And partying, in my opinion, is this facade that a lot of people fall for in their 20s. They think that just to enjoy your life in your 20s, you need to go out every weekend, you need to party, you need to get drunk, you need to do it all for the love of the game. And if you don't, you're not really enjoying your 20s and you're kind of weird. And personally, I think this is one of the biggest wastes of time in your 20s. Now, don't get me wrong. I fully agree with making memories, having good experiences, enjoying your life, but if every single weekend is spent getting drunk, recovering, feeling terrible for 2 to 3 days, and then repeating the cycle the next weekend, clearly something needs to change in your life because that type of lifestyle is never going to grow your income, it's not going to build your skills, and it's not going to improve your health at all. It's just going to keep you stuck exactly where you're at. So there has to be a balance between enjoying your life today, right now, whenever you want, and also progressing toward who you want to be tomorrow and in the future. Because if all you're doing is kind of chasing the next weekend and throwing them away, don't be surprised when years go by and nothing really progresses in the right direction for your life. So partying and not progressing, this will set you back 4 years. Next up on the list here is ignoring money. And this is a huge error a lot of people make in their 20s. And for some reason, most people think that this is one of those things that will just figure itself out, or it's not really worth paying attention to until you have a lot of money or are making a lot of money. But the reality is your 20s are when focusing on money matters the most. Because if you set yourself up early in the right ways when it comes to your finances, it's going to be so easy to scale and grow your income, grow your finances, your savings, and that nest egg that ultimately you'll either quit your job or retire on. However, if you wait till your 30s or your 40s or your 50s to really start taking money seriously, by that point, it's already too late. You've made the wrong habits and you missed out on so much time of compounding when it comes to your actual finances. So when it comes to your 20s, it doesn't have to be complicated. You can build a budget. You can learn how to save, understand investing, open a retirement account, or simply just know where your money is going every single month. Little simple habits like that will do so much for your financial literacy. So by ignoring money in your 20s, you are setting yourself back years. And once again, you're missing out on so much gain in the market when it comes to your savings, when it comes to your investing, whatever it might be. So take your money seriously in your 20s. It will have huge amounts of payoff later in life. Next up is letting social media influence your self-worth and how you see yourself as a person. And this one is incredibly dangerous because most people don't even realize that it's really happening to them. And you open social media, everyone who's seemingly younger than you is making six figures, they're buying houses, driving Lamborghinis, traveling the world, getting married, starting businesses, and somehow living this perfect life that it'll feel like you'll never really achieve. But the thing is, it's not normal to compare yourself to hundreds or even thousands of people every single day. For pretty much most of human history, you've compared yourself to maybe your friends, probably your family, some coworkers, maybe a handful of people that you know, but now you're comparing yourself to the most successful, the most attractive, the most wealthy, and most interesting people from all over the world, pretty much at the same time. So of course, naturally, you're going to feel behind. And the problem is that social media, I know this gets used a lot, but it's a highlight reel. People don't post the debt they're in. They don't post the stress they feel, the failures, or the years of work that went into what you're seeing. And you're comparing your everyday life to someone else's best moments. And once your self-worth becomes tied to what other people are doing, you start making decisions for the wrong reason. You start buying things you don't need, chasing goals you don't actually want. You need to focus on your own path because if you're consistently measuring yourself against everyone else online, you're going to spend your entire 20s feeling behind really no matter how much progress you make. So this is a very common trap that a lot of people in their 20s are currently making, and it's something we really need to try our best to stay away from. Next up is making dumb decisions because you're young. And this is one of the biggest lies and excuses people tell themselves in their 20s. People use being young as an excuse for all types of terrible decisions, whether it's financial, personal, whatever it might be. They think, I'm young, I'll figure it out. I'm young, now's the time to make mistakes. And while this is true to a certain extent, your 20s are a great time to take risks and learn from your mistakes, doesn't mean that every bad decision gets a free pass. There's a huge difference between taking a calculated risk and doing something stupid because you assume you're young and your future self will be able to deal with the consequences. So for example, example, getting arrested because you're young isn't a good decision. Racking up debt because you're young is not a good decision. Ignoring your health, your finances, your careers, your relationships because you're young is not smart. So the reality is a lot of the decisions you make in your 20s are going to follow you for much longer than you actually think. And if you're making bad decisions because you're using the excuse that you're young, typically the rest of your life is not going to be on the best type of trajectory. So this will set you back 4 years if you do it. Next up on the list is becoming dependent on addictions. And this is one of the fastest ways to destroy your 20s because it doesn't just affect one area of your life. This is going to affect everything in your life, whether it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, vaping, social media, literally anything else you could think of. Once something starts controlling your behavior, it becomes incredibly difficult to move forward. And the worst part about addictions is they don't start as addictions. They start as something fun or something social or something you do occasionally. And then before you know it, it becomes a daily habit that you really couldn't imagine living without. And when that happens, your money suffers, your health suffers, your relationship suffers, your career suffers, and your goals get pushed further and further away. And your 20s should be about building freedom and options. And addiction does the exact opposite. It slowly takes away your ability to choose and replaces that ability with dependency. And there are very few things that can derail your entire 20s decade faster than becoming dependent on something that's consistently holding you back. So this will ruin your life. Next up is chasing women, and this is one of the biggest distractions any guy can have in his 20s. And I'm not saying don't date, I'm not saying don't have relationships or put yourself out there. All of that's completely normal. What I'm talking about is when your entire life revolves around getting attention from women. Every decision you make, every dollar you spend, every weekend you have is centered around trying to impress a female, you start going in the wrong direction. And a lot of guys spend years doing this. They're worried about her texting back, getting her attention, taking her out, buying her things that they can't really afford, and stressing over people who honestly probably aren't thinking about them nearly as much as they think they are. Meanwhile, their finances aren't improving, their skills aren't improving, their health isn't improving, and their life is stuck in the same exact place. And the reality is, a lot of men are trying to find the right women before they've become a good man or the right man. And spending your 20s building yourself, your career, your finances, your confidence, all of that is going to lead to better relationships. And if you're constantly chasing validation from women, you're usually running away from something that you should be working on instead. So overall, chasing women, this can ruin your life, especially in your 20s, because you're taking away so much time from focusing on yourself. Next up is letting the wrong people into your life, and the people you surround yourself with have a massive impact on who you will become. If your friends are ambitious, they're disciplined, and they're pushing themselves every single day to be better people, chances are you'll naturally start doing the same alongside of them. But if the people around you are negative, they're irresponsible, they're going nowhere, they're deadbeats, it's very easy to get dragged down by them and be on their same level. And the worst part is, it usually doesn't happen all at once. It's those little habits over time, bad advice, bad habits, wasted weekends, your standards start to lower, and slowly but surely you start becoming more like the people you spend time with the most. And your 20s are too important to spend time around people who are actively pulling you away from the life you're really trying to achieve. And not everyone deserves access to you. Some people will help you grow, and some people will keep you exactly where you are. And one of the best decisions that you can make in your 20s is being intentional about who you let into your life, because the wrong people don't just waste your time, they can completely change the outlook of your future. So having the wrong people in your life around you, this can ruin your life as well. Next up on the list is not having any goals or direction and kind of just sleepwalking through your 20s. And this is one of those ones that you might be doing right now and not really feel like you're doing anything wrong, right? You wake up, you go to work, you come home, scroll on your phone a little bit, watch some TV, go to sleep, and you repeat it, and you're kind of just existing, right? And you do that for weeks, turns into months, you do that for months, it turns into years, and before you know it, you're 25, you're 30, you haven't progressed at all, and you're wondering where all the time went. And the problem isn't that you need every detailed part of your life figured out, right? Almost no one ever has that, but you do need some type of direction. And specifically, you need a specific direction, whether it's a goal or something you're working towards, and whether that's fitness or career or financial or business, something specific that you can focus your time towards. Because without direction, it's incredibly hard to make some type of meaningful progress. How do you know what opportunities to pursue or what skills to build or what decisions to make take if you don't know where exactly you're trying to go. And with no goals and no direction, that's how people end up kind of just drifting and existing for an entire decade. And your 20s don't need to be perfectly planned, right? I'm not saying that at all, but they should be spent moving towards something specific. Otherwise, you're kind of just existing through one of the most important decades of your life. So this is one of those ones that can set you back years and years if you don't take control of this earlier than later. Next up is being too scared to ask questions in your 20s. And a lot of people are terrified of looking stupid. So instead of asking the question, they stay quiet. They don't ask for help at work. They don't ask how investing works. They don't ask someone how to get a promotion, start a business, build the skills they want. And because of that, they feel stuck for a very long time. And the reality is, no one knows what they're doing at first. Every single person you look up to right now had to ask questions, they probably made mistakes, and ultimately they learned from people who were ahead of them. And I've found that some of the most successful people in my life are the ones who ask the most questions. They're curious, they want to learn, and they aren't worried about trying to protect their egos or this image of themselves. And your 20s are a time to be a sponge. You need to learn as much as possible. So I'm all for asking the dumb questions, asking for the advice, asking how something works, because, looking stupid for 30 seconds and gaining so much information because of it is way better than staying ignorant for that whole decade of your 20s. So this is something that is holding you back if you're too scared to ask questions. Next up is having nothing figured out by the end of your 20s. And somewhere along the way, people got this idea that by 25 or 30, you need to have the perfect career, the perfect relationship, have a house already, six-figure job, perfect finances, and the complete plan for the rest of your life. And the reality is, even people in their 40s and 50s are still trying to figure out life as they go. Your 20s are supposed to be a time of learning, experimenting, making mistakes, and discovering what you truly want out of life. And the problem is, a lot of people spend years overthinking their next move because they're scared of making the wrong one. Meanwhile, the people making progress are just taking actual action, learning, and adjusting along the way. So you don't need all the answers in your 20s. You'll never need that. You just need direction and the willingness to keep moving forward. So this is one of those things that if you have nothing figured out in your 20s or by the end of your 20s, it's completely okay. Everyone's still trying to figure out life, and there's no perfect formula to win. Next up is choosing comfort over growth. And a lot of the best opportunities that we get offered in life are simply uncomfortable, whether it's moving to a new city, taking a better job, starting a business, whatever it might be. And the problem is, a lot of us choose the comfort route because it feels good in the moment. And it's easier to stay where you are, keep doing what you're doing, and avoid all the uncertainty life has to offer. But if every decision that you make is based on what's comfortable and what, caters to your life the best, don't be surprised when your life looks exactly the same in 5 years from now. And growth usually requires some level of discomfort. It's just how it works. Now, I'm not saying you need to take, reckless risks or make your life harder than it needs to be, but if you're constantly choosing comfort over opportunities that are potentially out there for you, you're probably leaving a lot of potential on the table, whether it's career growth, financial growth, relationship growth, etc. So your 20s are a few of the times where you can actually afford to take those chances, and don't waste that time by playing it safe and not really, acting when you need to. So this is one of those things that can and will set you back for years if you continue to choose comfort over growth. Next up is never taking any meaningful risks. And this kind of goes hand in hand with choosing comfort, but I do think it's a little different. If you never take any meaningful risk in your 20s, you're probably going to end up with a very predictable life. And for some people, that's fine. But for most people, the biggest opportunities come from doing things that aren't guaranteed to work or have a 100% success rate. People spend so much time trying to avoid failure that unfortunately they accidentally avoid their opportunities as well. And look, not every risk is going to work out. In fact, a lot of them won't. But your 20s are some of the best times in your life to take those shots because you have time to recover from things if they don't go accordingly. And I would rather be 30 years old and say, hey, you know what? I tried it and it didn't work, rather than being 30 and wondering what would have happened if I just went for it. So this is one of those things that is holding you back. I don't necessarily think it'll hold you back for years, but if there's a calculated risk that you've been wanting to take and could have some good payoff, in your 20s is the time to do it. Next up is being too nice in your 20s. And when you're younger, you think being the good guy means saying yes to everyone, never causing problems, never speaking up, and always putting other people first. So you let people distract you, you let your friends waste your time, you stay in relationships you know aren't right, you take on responsibilities that aren't yours, and you avoid difficult conversations because you don't want to upset anyone. And before you know it, you're living this life built around keeping everyone else happy while you're not happy. And the reality is, no one respects someone who can't really stand up for themselves. You need to know how to say no. You need to know how to tell someone they're wrong. And you need to know how to walk away from people or situations and relationships that just aren't good for you. And a lot of men will spend years trying to be liked by everyone and end up respected by nobody. Now, you don't need to be rude, you don't need to be selfish, but you do need to be able to stand up for yourself. Being too nice is a common trap that a lot of people fall into. And once again, I know on the surface of it, it's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with it, but as you progress through life, you need to know when to cater to yourself first. Next up is not leaving the house enough. And this has become a very common problem, way more than people realize because of social media. And a lot of people wake up, they'll go to work, that's when they'll leave their house, and they come home and spend the rest of their life on social media. And then they wonder why they don't have friends, can't meet women, don't have opportunities, and kind of just feel overall stuck in their lives. And the reality is, life happens outside of your front door. You know, the job opportunities, the friendships, the relationships, experiences, networking, and random opportunities that can completely change your life usually aren't going to show up in your bedroom behind your phone screen. And look, I'm not saying you need to be out partying every night because I don't agree with that, but I'm talking about getting involved in the world, in your community, going to the gym, going to a sports league. You know, if you're into it, getting involved in your church, attending an event, meeting people, traveling, whatever it might be, just trying something new outside of that front door. Because some of the best things that have happened in my life simply came from being in the right place at the right time. And if you're always home, those opportunities never really have a chance to find you. So your 20s are way too important to spend watching everyone else live their lives through that phone screen. So this is one of those things that not leaving enough is potentially holding you back. And, you know, while you're young, in your 20s, have the time, go out, enjoy new experiences, meet new people. Next up on the list is not building skills outside of your 9 to 5. And more than likely, you go to work every day, you do your job, and at the end of the week, maybe middle of the week, you collect a paycheck, and then you assume everything is going to work itself out. The problem is, if your only valuable skill is the one your employer is paying you for, you're more than likely putting all your eggs in one basket. You know, unfortunately, your job can change. Your industry can change. You could get laid off. You know, life happens, things happen. That's why your 20s are such a great time to build skills outside of work. And the point is that the more skills you have, the more opportunities and value you create for yourself. And I've found personally that a lot of people who end up doing really well financially aren't necessarily the smartest. They have just spent years stacking skills and knowledge on top of each other while everyone else clocked out at 5 p.m. and then just completely stopped learning. So I'm not necessarily saying you need to do like the hustle culture, you know, I don't enjoy my life and I only learn skills, but your job should be your source of income, not your only source of growth when it comes to your skills and your value. So this is a very common trap that a lot of people in their 20s fall into. And I would always recommend in your free time, whenever you feel up to it, start learning some new skills that can, you know, benefit your daily life. Next up is legal trouble. And this is one of those things that a lot of people don't think will ever happen to them. And one dumb decision can turn into an arrest. It can turn into a DUI, a lawsuit, criminal record, and or thousands of dollars in fines and legal fees. And like I said, most people never think this will happen to them. And unlike a lot of the mistakes in your 20s, legal troubles can follow you for years and hold you back from so many different opportunities. It can and will affect your jobs, your housing, your finances, and opportunities you haven't even thought about yet. And there's plenty of mistakes that you can make and recover from in your 20s, but this is one of the few where the consequences just can stick around long after you've learned your lesson. So don't throw away years of progress for, you know, just a few hours of judgment mistakes that you might make in your 20s, because this can and unfortunately will ruin your life if you get into serious legal troubles. Next is locking yourself into an expensive lifestyle. And this is one of the easiest ways to ruin your 20s, because on the surface, this feels like you're just winning, like you're doing better than everyone else, right? So typically what happens is you get a raise, you start making some decent money in your 20s, you know, early 20s, you actually get your first big boy job, and then you upgrade your car, you upgrade your clothes, you maybe go on some more expensive vacations, you start going out to eat a lot more, and before you know it, every single dollar you make is tied up on a credit card already, or it's already spoken for. And the problem isn't buying nice things, right? I'm all for buying nice things and enjoying your money. The problem is that you build a lifestyle that requires you to keep making that same income or more just to maintain it. And a lot of people think that they're getting richer because they're spending more. Like, just because I have a Rolex means I'm in a higher tax bracket, when in reality, you're becoming more dependent on every single paycheck that comes your way. And one of the best things you can do in your 20s is keeping your expenses relatively low while your income grows. That's how you create that gap between what you're earning and spending, and that's how you build your savings, your investments, and your actual financial freedom. Because once you've locked yourself into a very expensive lifestyle, every career decision becomes harder. Now you're not really working because you want to, you're working because you have to. So this unfortunately can set you back 4 years in your not only your personal growth, but also your financial progress. Next up is choosing a bad career or degree. And this one is kind of tough because no one, I don't think, knowingly chooses a bad career or a degree. Like no one's like, oh, this is a bad career, let me hop into it. But a lot of people pick something without really thinking about the long-term consequences and outlook of that particular career or degree. So they might choose a major because all their friends did it, or because it sounds interesting, or because someone online told them to follow their passion, it's going to pay off. And then they never stop to actually ask themselves, like, what does that job market look like? What does the pay look like? What does the, 10, 20, 30 year outlook look like? And now I'm not saying every decision needs to be based on money, but ignoring earning potential and job opportunities and demand and career growth is a huge mistake a lot of people will make in their 20s. And your career is likely going to be your biggest wealth generating tool for probably the next 40 years for the majority of people. So it deserves more thought than a lot of people actually give it. And look, if you're already in a career or a degree that isn't ideal, it's not the end of the world, right? People switch careers and switch degrees all the time, even in their 30s and their 40s. But choosing something with no plan or no true job demand can make life a lot harder than it actually needs to be. Your 20s are too important to spend years, climbing the ladder of college and trying to get a degree just to realize that that future career isn't going to fulfill you in the way you need to be. So this is a very common trap that a lot of people fall into. I do think it's one you can get out of, if you make the right decisions, but just be careful before you enter college and really start looking at career fields. Do your research, understand what you actually need out of life before choosing that route. Next up is ignoring your health. And this is a huge decision that a lot of people regret in their 20s because it's very easy to go overboard with this. And when you're young, what happens is we all do it. We eat like crap, we barely work out, we barely sleep. And for the most part, most of us still feel pretty okay. We still feel pretty healthy. So a lot of us, we, unknowingly convince ourselves that our health isn't really something we need to worry about yet. And the problem is, you're building these habits that are going to follow you into your 30s and your 40s and beyond. And your health impacts everything. It impacts your energy, your confidence, your productivity, your ability to even make more money. So it's hard to build a great life when you consistently feel unhealthy and unmotivated. And the reality is that taking care of yourself isn't as complicated, once again, as people make it out to be. Start simple, lift some weights, go for a little bit of a walk, get outside, eat reasonably well, just cut out McDonald's, right? Sleep well enough. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be like this trainer that follows these strict regimens and routines. Literally, even going outside and walking 1,000 steps is better than doing nothing. And a lot of people spend their 20s acting like their body is just going to last forever, and then they spend their 50s and 60s and 70s trying to undo all the damage they did in their 20s. So your health is one of the few things that affects literally every single area of your life, and ignore it at your own risk, because this will ruin your life if you're not careful with it. And to round out the tier list here is not letting anything ever compound. And what I mean by this is everyone in their 20s wants results immediately. If they don't see progress in a few weeks or a few months, more than likely they're going to quit and they're just going to move on to something else. You could also call this like shiny object syndrome, right? They start investing, then they stop because they aren't a millionaire yet. They start going to the gym, then they stop because they haven't put on 30 pounds of muscle. They start a business, then they stop because they're not a millionaire. They start learning a skill, and then they stop because they don't see any initial payoff. And the problem is, almost everything valuable in life requires time to compound, but none of those things have a chance to work if you're consistently resetting that internal clock and jumping to the next thing. And obviously, nothing deserves your commitment forever. You have to make a smart decision when to actually pivot away from something, because on the flip side, someone can spend 5 years on something that actually is going to go nowhere. But if you never actually stick with anything long enough to see it compound, you're going to spend a decade busy without actually getting anywhere, because you're consistently jumping from one thing to another. So this is one of those things that, in my opinion, will set you back for years. And like I said, just because you found something you want to stick to, don't stick to it for 10 years if it's going nowhere. Find a good point to pivot away from it. But ultimately, you have to let important things in your life really compound over time to see true payoff from them. So that concludes my tier list for how to destroy your 20s. There's plenty of things that ruin your life, whether it's you being dependent on addictions, chasing women, letting the wrong people in, legal troubles, ignoring your health, and there's plenty of things that are going to set you back for years, like partying, ignoring money, having no direction, choosing comfort over growth, etc. But the main thing I want you guys to take away from this video is this: your 20s are not about being perfect. There's no written rules in stone on how to live your 20s, how to get the most out of your 20s, and how to really set yourself up for the win later in life. The most you can do is just try your best. Every single day, try your best, try to work in the right direction, and try to avoid as many of these things as much as possible. So overall, let me know in the comments what I missed, what you guys agree and disagree with. And if you like the tier list and want to see more of them, hit the like, hit the subscribe. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.